chosen ones. God just gave you one last sign, and if you ignore it now, you may miss what heaven has been trying to tell you all along. There are moments in life that do not feel ordinary. They arrive quietly, but they carry weight. A delay, a disturbance, a strange pull in your spirit, a deep knowing that something is changing, even when everything around you still looks the same. That is how divine warnings often come, not with noise, not with thunder, but with a holy pressure in your soul that refuses to leave you alone. And if you have been feeling that pressure lately, then listen closely, because this is not about fear. This is about recognition. This is about the final nudge, before a door closes, before a season ends, before the path ahead demands a decision that cannot be delayed forever. You have probably felt different for a long time, not in a way that you could always explain, just different, like your spirit never fully fit inside the rooms you were placed in, like you could sense things before they happened, like certain people drained you for no clear reason, like silence felt more honest than conversation, like your inner world was louder than the world around you. That difference was never an accident. It was never a flaw. It was never proof that something was wrong with you. It was proof that you were being shaped for something else, something higher, something that could not be manufactured by popularity, comfort, or approval, something that required pain, pruning, and holy fire. Chosen ones are often misunderstood because they carry a burden most people never see. They are not simply people who are blessed, they are people who are being prepared, and preparation is rarely gentle. Preparation is crazy. Preparation exposes. Preparation reveals what is hidden. Preparation removes what feels safe so that what is sacred can finally remain. This is why the chosen often go through seasons that feel like loss but are actually alignment. People leave, plans collapse, doors shut, the applause fades, the room gets quieter, and while everyone else calls it failure, heaven calls it separation. Because some things cannot enter your next level with you, some bonds cannot survive the version of you that is being born. That is the part many never understand. The chosen are not being punished, they are being positioned, and positioning can feel like pressure before it feels like peace. It can feel like confusion before it feels like clarity. It can feel like being hidden before it feels like being honored, but hidden does not mean forgotten. Hidden often means protected. There is a strange loneliness that follows the one who is being awakened. You can be surrounded and still feel unseen. You can smile and still feel like your heart is carrying language no one around you speaks. You can be praised and still feel separate from the crowd. That loneliness is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that your spirit is no longer asleep. And when your spirit wakes up, everything changes. You stop tolerating what once felt normal. You start sensing the weight behind words. You begin to notice the gap between performance and truth. You become less interested in fitting in and more interested in being real. You begin craving peace over attention, substance over image, and purpose over comfort. That is when the battle intensifies, because once you awaken, you become dangerous to the systems that depend on your sleep. A sleeping chosen one is manageable. A distracted chosen one is controllable, but an awakened chosen one begins to remember. And memory is powerful. Memory brings identity. Identity brings authority. Authority breaks captivity. So the world tries to numb you. It gives you endless noise, endless comparison, endless distraction. It encourages you to chase what shines while ignoring what is sacred. It teaches you to live outwardly while dying inwardly. It asks you to perform strength while secretly avoiding transformation. It wants you busy but not blessed, loud but not rooted, seen but not deep. Yet somewhere beneath all of that, your soul has been resisting. You have felt the tension. You have felt the divide. You have felt the pull between who the world expected you to be and who you know you were created to become. That tension is not confusion. That tension is awakening. It is the war between imitation and calling. Chosen ones often carry signs long before they carry visibility. They feel things intensely. They are deeply aware of energy, tone, and intention. They can walk into a room and know when something is off. They may be called too sensitive by people who have grown comfortable being numb. But sensitivity is often sacred when it is connected to discernment. They also tend to go through repeated tests, the same lesson in different forms, the same temptation wearing new clothes, the same wound knocking from another door. It feels repetitive because heaven is not trying to humiliate you. Heaven is trying to mature you. Until you stop reacting from pain and start responding from truth, the lesson remains, and truth is not always soft. Sometimes truth arrives to confront the lies you have lived with for years, the lie that you are too late, the lie that you are not enough, the lie that your past disqualifies you, the lie that the delay means denial, the lie that because no one noticed your struggle, it must not matter. Heaven sees what people miss. Heaven marks what people overlook. That is why the chosen often experience hidden seasons that reshape everything. The crying you did in private, the nights you kept breathing through disappointment, the mornings you got up while carrying a weight no one knew about, the moments you wanted to quit but did not. Those unseen battles were not wasted. They were forging something in you that visibility could never create. There is a reason the enemy fights your peace so hard, because peace is not just a feeling. Peace is evidence that your inner world is beginning to align with divine order, and order is dangerous to darkness. When you are scattered, you are easier to manipulate. When you are anchored, you become difficult to move. When you are spiritually grounded, the lies lose their power. That is why chaos often intensifies right before breakthrough. Not because you are failing, but because resistance increases near the threshold. You do not get chased because you are weak. You get chased because you are close. Close to the lesson, close to the shift, close to the answer that would change everything. And yet, in the middle of all this, there is a sign that stands above the rest. The sign that tells you this message is not random. The sign that tells you heaven is pressing you to pay attention now. It is this: you can no longer pretend that what once sustained you still fits you. The old life is becoming too small for your spirit. The old distractions are losing their power. The old identity is cracking under the weight of your becoming. This is what many call discomfort, but in the spirit it is often mercy. Because discomfort can be the alarm that keeps you from settling where you were never meant to stay. It can be the warning that your soul is outgrowing the cage. It can be the sacred frustration that pushes you out of stagnation and into surrender. Surrender is where the real turning begins, not when you control everything, not when you finally have all the answers, but when you stop resisting the process that is breaking you open. Chosen ones are not called to preserve the old self. They are called to let it die with dignity, so a truer life can rise in its place. That is never easy, because the old self knows how to survive. It knows how to blend in. It knows how to smile at the right time and stay silent at the right time. It knows how to avoid rejection by becoming acceptable. But the new self is different. The new self does not exist to be accepted by everyone. The new self exists to be aligned with what is true. This is why the chosen often feel out of place in familiar environments. What once entertained them no longer satisfies them. What once impressed them now feels empty. What once felt like success now feels like a costume. And that inner refusal is not rebellion, it is refinement. It is your spirit refusing to worship what cannot carry you. You may have noticed that some people only love the version of you that stays small. They prefer the version that never asks hard questions, the version that never outgrows the relationship, the version that never challenges the room. But once the call rises inside you, that version cannot remain. The chosen are not made for shrinking, they are made for becoming. And becoming requires letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. That is one of the hardest thresholds, because human beings naturally want validation. We want someone to witness our pain and confirm that it mattered. We want someone to see the tears, the effort, the change, the cost. But the path of the chosen often includes seasons where no one claps, no one explains, and no one rescues. Only God remains close enough to guide. That hidden closeness is everything. It is in the hidden place that the heart is purified. It is in the hidden place that motives are tested. It is in the hidden place that false strength falls away and real faith begins. You do not become powerful by appearing powerful. You become powerful by surviving the silence and still choosing truth. Many chosen ones are learning this now. They are realizing that the signs were always there. The repeated interruptions, the strong urge to isolate, the sudden loss of interest in shallow things, the way certain paths kept closing before they could settle in them, the way their inner world became louder whenever they tried to ignore it. These are not random events. They are the language of awakening, and the world rarely honors that language. The world prefers certainty, speed, and performance. It wants you to explain yourself quickly and prove yourself constantly. But spiritual calling does not always move on the schedule of public approval. Sometimes the deepest work takes place while no one is watching. Sometimes the seed looks buried long after it has already begun to grow. Do not underestimate buried seasons. They are not evidence that nothing is happening. They are often the exact place where roots are strengthening. Roots do not announce themselves. Roots work beneath the surface. Roots anchor what cannot yet be seen. And when the storm comes, it is the unseen root that decides whether the tree stands or falls. The chosen are being rooted right now, rooted in discernment, rooted in endurance, rooted in endurance, rooted in a deeper kind of knowing that cannot be taken by pressure. This is why the attacks often intensify when your clarity begins to sharpen. Darkness does not fear emotion as much as it fears discernment. It fears a person who can see through illusion. So much of the struggle you have faced has been about vision, not eyesight, but spiritual sight. The ability to perceive what is beneath the surface, the ability to recognize when something is misaligned, even if it looks attractive, the ability to sense when a door is open but not ordained. That kind of sight can be isolating because it often makes you arrive at conclusions others do not reach until later. But that does not mean you are wrong. It may mean you are early, and being early is another burden the chosen carry. They see before others see. They feel before others feel. They know before others know. And when they speak too soon, they are misunderstood. When they stay silent, they are called distant. There is often no easy place for the one who carries revelation before the room is ready. Still, revelation cannot be hidden forever. There comes a point when what is inside must surface. The call grows too loud. The unease becomes impossible to ignore. The old compromise loses its taste. The old fear loses its grip. Something within you rises and says no more. No more shrinking. No more performing. No more pretending that absence of collapse means presence of peace. That is the last sign many receive before transformation. Not a thunderbolt, not a spectacle, just a deep inner knowing that the time to choose has come. The old way will not carry you forward. The comfortable lie will not protect you. The familiar delay will not save you. A decision is standing at your door, and your future is listening. This is the part where many hesitate, because change sounds beautiful until it asks for obedience. Healing sounds inspiring until it asks for honesty. Purpose sounds powerful until it asks for sacrifice. But the chosen cannot remain in the half-light forever. At some point, the soul must step forward or remain trapped in the shadow of what could have been. And what a tragedy it would be to miss the sign just because it arrived in a form you did not expect. Sometimes God warns through discomfort, sometimes through repetition, sometimes through loss, sometimes through a door shutting with perfect timing, sometimes through the sudden emptiness of what once felt meaningful. The sign is not always gentle, but it is always merciful. Mercy does not always feel soft. Sometimes mercy interrupts. Sometimes mercy exposes. Sometimes mercy removes. And when it does, it is because heaven sees what you cannot yet see. It sees the trap behind the temptation. It sees the dead end behind the applause. It sees the exhaustion waiting at the end of the road you were about to keep walking. The chosen are often spared through disruption. That is why the breakdown did not destroy you. That is why the detour was not a delay, but a rescue. That is why the people who walked away may have been part of an extraction you did not understand yet. Heaven can use loss to save identity. Heaven can use silence to reveal truth. Heaven can use empty hands to teach holy dependence. And dependence is not weakness, it is clarity. It is the end of self-sufficiency. It is the place where the soul finally admits that it cannot carry destiny alone. The chosen are not called to be self-made, they are called to be formed. And formation is not glamorous, it is honest. It is patient, it is costly. It asks you to keep showing up when the outcome is not yet visible. There is something powerful about the one who keeps walking without applause, the one who keeps praying when nothing feels immediate, the one who keeps choosing integrity when compromise would be easier, the one who keeps listening for heaven's voice in a world that only rewards noise. That person is being transformed into something rare. Rare people are not always celebrated by the crowd. In fact, rarity often invites resistance, because what is uncommon makes others uncomfortable. It reveals what they have settled for. It exposes the difference between appearance and substance. It reminds people that they were made for more than survival, but not everyone is ready to face that reminder. So the chosen are sometimes accused, minimized, excluded, or dismissed. Not because they lack value, but because their presence challenges a system built on shallow comfort. A person carrying depth will always disturb a room addicted to surfaces. A person carrying truth will always disrupt a culture built on convenience. A person carrying light will always expose what darkness has been hiding. That is why your path has felt like a battlefield, because in many ways it is. But not every battle is meant to be fought with force. Some battles are won by staying surrendered. Some are won by refusing bitterness. Some are won by not allowing pain to become your identity. Some are won by remembering who you are, even when the environment tries to rename you. And your name, your true name, is not what fear says. It is not what rejection says. It is not what your rejection says. It is not what your worst day says. It is not what the critics say. Your name is connected to the purpose that marked you before you ever knew how hard the road would be. The chosen are called before they are understood. That is why they often spend years trying to decode what heaven already wrote into their spirit. Maybe that is what has been happening in your life all along. The confusion was never just confusion. It was invitation. The ache was never just pain, it was direction. The doors that would not stay open were not failures, they were redirections. The people who could not stay were not always losses. Some were lessons, some were tests. Some were removals protecting what was still growing in you. And that growth is not finished, not even close. There is more in you than the current season has shown. More wisdom, more clarity, more courage, more endurance, more mercy, more authority, more alignment. The reason it still feels heavy is because what is being formed in you is too important to be rushed. So do not curse the process, do not resent the silence, do not confuse the pruning with abandonment. Do not call it the end when heaven is actually making room. The sign is here because the turning point is near. And the question is no longer whether you are chosen. The question is whether you will trust the one who chose you enough to walk through the open door before it closes. Because doors do close, seasons do end, opportunities do pass, and sometimes the final sign is not given to scare you, but to awaken you before your delay becomes your regret. The moment is serious now. The stirring in your spirit is real. The pressure to move, to let go, to listen, to obey, to become is not coming from nowhere. It is coming because heaven knows what is ahead. It is coming because your life cannot remain split forever. It is coming because the old pattern has reached its limit. It is coming because the next chapter requires a version of you that can only exist after surrender. And that version is closer than you think. So breathe, listen, still yourself. The noise around you is loud, but it is not Lord. The fear in your mind is persistent, but it is not prophecy. The confusion is heavy, but it is not your identity. Something greater has already begun to move, and the sign you were given is the proof that your story is not ending in the place where pain first found you. You were never meant to remain in the place of almost free, almost healed, almost ready, almost brave, almost whole. The chosen are not called to live in almost. They are called to cross over, and this is the hour where the crossing becomes necessary, because what waits on the other side will not meet the version of you that keeps hesitating at the threshold. The threshold is uncomfortable because it demands separation from everything that kept your spirit asleep, and awakening always carries a cost. There are people who love the quieter version of you because that version never challenged them. There are environments that welcomed you only when you ignored your discernment. There are habits that comforted you while slowly draining your purpose. But once heaven places the final sign in front of a chosen one, neutrality becomes impossible. You either move forward into transformation or slowly return to the cage you were praying to escape. That is why your spirit has felt restless lately. Restlessness is often misunderstood. People assume it means instability, but spiritual restlessness can actually be holy. It can be the soul recognizing that it has stayed in one place too long. It can be the inner alarm that sounds when your environment no longer matches your assignment. The chosen often feel this before major shifts. They begin sensing that their current reality cannot contain who they are becoming. And when that feeling rises, fear usually follows. Fear hates transition because transition threatens familiar suffering. Human beings can become attached even to what hurts them simply because it is predictable. That is why many chosen ones stay in cycles longer than they were meant to. Not because they lack strength, but because the unknown feels heavier than the pain they already understand. But there comes a moment where staying becomes more painful than leaving. A moment where pretending costs more than honesty. A moment where silence becomes betrayal against your own soul. That is where many of you are standing right now. You can feel the pull, you can feel heaven asking for your attention in a way that cannot be ignored anymore. The final sign often arrives after repeated whispers. First comes the subtle discomfort, then the repeated interruptions, then the exhaustion that no amount of distraction can cure, then the realization that you have been surviving instead of living, and finally comes the moment where something inside you says, enough. Herein comes the moment where something inside you says enough. Enough shrinking. Enough abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. Enough calling numbness peace. The chosen are not meant to live disconnected from their spirit, yet many spend years doing exactly that. They silence their intuition to avoid conflict. They bury their gifts to avoid attention. They suppress their emotions to appear strong. They ignore divine nudges because obedience feels risky. But ignored truth does not disappear. It waits. It lingers. It returns again and again until the soul finally responds. That response changes everything, because once a chosen one begins listening inwardly, the illusion around them starts collapsing. Suddenly, conversations feel empty that once felt exciting. Suddenly, approval feels shallow. Suddenly, endless busyness begins to feel like spiritual starvation. You start recognizing how much of modern life is built to distract people from themselves, and once you see it, you cannot fully unsee it. This realization can feel isolating at first. You look around and wonder how so many people can continue moving through life without questioning anything deeper. You wonder how they can accept environments that crush their spirit. You wonder how they can smile through emptiness without feeling disturbed. But awakening separates you from unconscious living. Once your eyes begin opening, the performance around you becomes harder to tolerate. That does not mean you become better than others. It means you become more aware. Awareness is not superiority. It is responsibility. And responsibility can feel heavy when you realize how much of your life was shaped by fear, conditioning, or survival. Many chosen ones grieve during awakening because they begin seeing how often they betrayed themselves just to belong. Belonging is one of the deepest human desires. Everyone wants connection. Everyone wants to feel accepted somewhere, but the chosen often learn a painful truth early in life. False belonging is expensive. It asks you to abandon pieces of your spirit just to remain included. It rewards silence over authenticity. It teaches you to perform instead of transform. And eventually the soul becomes exhausted from carrying identities it was never meant to wear. That exhaustion is sacred when it leads to truth, because eventually the masks become too heavy. The chosen begin craving something real, not image, not status, not shallow validation, real peace, real alignment, real connection, real purpose. The hunger for authenticity becomes stronger than the fear of rejection, and that is when transformation begins accelerating. Transformation rarely looks dramatic at first. Sometimes it starts quietly. You stop forcing certain relationships. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You become more protective of your energy. You begin noticing how your body reacts around certain people. You start valuing silence more than noise. You begin pulling away from things that once controlled you. Small changes on the outside often reveal massive shifts within. The world may misunderstand these changes. Some people will accuse you of becoming distant. Others will say you changed too much. But what they often mean is this: you stopped being convenient for them. Growth disrupts unhealthy dynamics. When a chosen one starts healing, manipulation stops working the same way. Guilt stops controlling them. Fear loses influence. And people who benefited from the old version may resist the new one. Do not let that resistance confuse you. Every transformation attracts opposition. Even nature resists sudden change. But resistance does not always mean you are moving in the wrong direction. Sometimes resistance is confirmation that the old structure can feel itself losing control over you. There are spiritual battles that never appear physical, yet they shape entire destinies. Battles of thought, battles of identity, battles of worth, battles over whether you will trust your calling or surrender to fear. The enemy rarely begins by destroying a chosen one outwardly. First, it tries to weaken them inwardly. It attacks confidence. It attacks hope. It attacks clarity, because a confused spirit is easier to delay. Delay is one of the greatest weapons used against the chosen. Not destruction, delay. Endless postponement, endless hesitation, endless waiting for certainty before obedience. But certainty is rarely given before movement. Faith often begins where guarantees end. That is why the chosen must eventually learn to move while still feeling afraid. Fear itself is not always the problem. Everyone feels fear. The problem comes when fear becomes authority, when fear decides your future, when fear speaks louder than truth. Many chosen ones have delayed their next chapter because they kept waiting for fear to disappear completely. But courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing alignment despite fear. And alignment is expensive. It may cost you relationships that no longer reflect who you are becoming. It may cost you comfort. It may cost you old identities. It may even cost you the approval of people you deeply wanted validation from. But there is something more costly than all of that combined. Living disconnected from your purpose. A soul disconnected from purpose slowly loses its fire. Life begins feeling repetitive. Days blur together. Motivation fades. Joy weakens. The spirit feels trapped inside routines that no longer nourish it. Many people mistake this for laziness or depression alone, but sometimes it is deeper than that. Sometimes it is the pain of living outside alignment for too long. That pain becomes unbearable eventually because the chosen are not designed merely to exist. They are designed to awaken others through the way they live, through their courage, through their truth, through their refusal to remain asleep in systems that reward numbness. And the closer they get to stepping fully into that calling, the more intense the spiritual pressure becomes. You may have noticed this already. Right when you start becoming clearer, confusion suddenly increases around you. Right when you start healing, distractions appear. Right when you commit to peace, chaos knocks on your door. This is not coincidence. Darkness often grows louder when it senses it is losing access to you, but hear this clearly. Noise is not power. Confusion is not authority. Delay is not denial. Just because the battle intensified does not mean you lost. Sometimes the strongest resistance appears right before breakthrough because your next step threatens patterns that have controlled you for years. The chosen are often attacked most heavily in areas connected to their calling. If they are meant to bring truth, they experience lies and betrayal. If they are meant to carry love, they experience rejection. If they are meant to bring healing, they experience deep wounds. The pain is not random. It becomes part of the preparation. Preparation creates compassion when it does not harden into bitterness. That is another test the chosen must face. Pain can either deepen your wisdom or poison your spirit. Many people suffer, but not everyone allows suffering to transform them. The chosen are called to walk through fire without becoming consumed by hatred. That does not mean pretending wounds never happened. Healing requires honesty. It requires acknowledging the betrayal, the abandonment, the disappointment, the grief. Spiritual growth is not emotional suppression, it is emotional truth, surrendered to a higher wisdom. The chosen learn to feel deeply without letting pain become their identity. Identity matters more than most people realize. Whoever controls your identity controls your direction. That is why society constantly tries to define people through fear, labels, comparison, or achievement. A person unsure of who they are becomes easier to manipulate. But when a chosen one remembers their spiritual identity, chains begin breaking internally. You were never created merely to survive systems that drain your spirit. You were created to carry light into dark places without losing yourself inside them. And that assignment requires inner strength, not performative strength, not ego, real strength. The kind developed through surrender, endurance, and truth. Truth changes a person slowly before it changes them suddenly. At first it whispers, then it unsettles, then it confronts, then eventually it transforms. That is why awakening can feel uncomfortable. Your spirit begins rejecting what your old self once tolerated. And the more aligned you become, the less patience you have for illusion. Illusion is everywhere now. People are rewarded for appearances while secretly collapsing inside. Many smile publicly while carrying emptiness privately. Many chase attention because silence forces them to confront wounds they have avoided for years. But the chosen cannot escape themselves forever. Eventually, they are pulled inward toward healing. Healing is not always beautiful in the beginning. Sometimes it feels like grieving versions of yourself that kept you safe. Sometimes it means admitting you were settling. Sometimes it means recognizing that the life you built no longer reflects the person you truly are. That realization can shake everything, yet shaking is sometimes necessary. Weak foundations must crack before stronger ones can be built. That is why heaven allows certain disruptions, not to destroy you, but to free you from structures that could never support your next level. The chosen often mistake divine redirection for punishment because they do not yet understand what they are being protected from. Protection does not always feel pleasant. Sometimes protection looks like rejection. Sometimes it looks like closed doors. Sometimes it looks like losing what you desperately wanted. But years later, many chosen ones look back and realize the very thing that broke their heart also saved their future. You are beginning to see this now. The patterns are becoming clearer. The signs are becoming impossible to ignore. Your spirit knows something important is happening beneath the surface of your life. Even if you cannot fully explain it yet, you feel it. The pressure, the stirring, the call toward something deeper. This is not the time to go back to sleep spiritually. Too much has already been revealed to you. Once heaven gives the final sign, accountability increases. You cannot pretend you do not know anymore. You cannot keep abandoning yourself while expecting peace to follow. The moment demands response, and response does not always mean dramatic action overnight. Sometimes response begins internally, a decision, a surrender, a willingness to stop fighting the truth. Every outward transformation first begins as an inward agreement. The chosen become powerful the moment they stop running from who they are. Who are you really beneath the fear, beneath the masks, beneath the conditioning, beneath the survival habits you developed just to make it through painful seasons? That is the question awakening forces you to confront, not who the world told you to become, not who trauma shaped you into, but who your spirit has always been underneath it all. That person still exists, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the disappointment, beneath the years of silence and confusion. Your essence was never destroyed. Buried, maybe. Ignored, maybe. Wounded, certainly, but not destroyed. The light inside the chosen can be dimmed temporarily, but it cannot be erased completely, and heaven knows exactly how to call that light back to life. Sometimes through stillness, sometimes through heartbreak, sometimes through isolation, sometimes through a message that suddenly reaches your soul at the exact moment you were ready to hear it. Divine timing often feels mysterious until you realize your spirit was being prepared all along. Preparation is happening right now, whether you recognize it fully or not. The uncomfortable season, the emotional pressure, the strange distance from old environments, the growing hunger for truth, none of it is accidental. Your soul is shifting into alignment with something greater than the life you once settled for. And once alignment begins, compromise becomes harder. You cannot unknow what your spirit now understands. You cannot comfortably return to illusions that have already been exposed. The chosen are ruined for shallow living, after awakening touches them deeply enough. That is why this final sign matters so much, because it is not merely a warning. It is an invitation into a new level of consciousness, purpose, and spiritual authority. The question is whether you will answer before the opportunity passes into another season. Because some opportunities are seasonal. They arrive with a window attached to them, and when heaven keeps repeating the same message through different signs, different struggles, different awakenings, it is not trying to confuse you. It is trying to prepare you before the moment of decision fully arrives. The chosen often miss their next chapter because they keep waiting for perfect certainty while God is waiting for simple obedience. You already feel the truth inside you, that quiet voice that refuses to disappear, that pull towards something deeper, that discomfort every time you betray your spirit just to stay accepted. Those feelings are not random emotions. They are signals. They are reminders that your soul was never created to remain trapped inside fear, distraction, or limitation. And maybe this is why you found this message today, not for entertainment, not by coincidence, but because a part of you was searching for confirmation that the shift you feel is real. Heaven has been trying to wake you gently for a long time, through pain, through silence, through closed doors, through unexpected endings, through moments where your spirit whispered that you were meant for more. Now the whisper is becoming louder. The old version of you cannot carry the future waiting ahead, the people-pleasing, the hesitation, the constant self-doubt, the endless delay. It all has to break eventually so your real identity can finally breathe. And even though the process feels heavy, your spirit already knows what your mind is still afraid to accept. You are being called into a higher life, so do not ignore the final sign. Do not shrink back into the comfort that nearly destroyed your peace. Do not return to environments that silence your soul. Do not keep abandoning your inner truth just because others refuse to understand your transformation. The chosen path was never meant to be easy, but it was always meant to lead you toward freedom. And one day you will look back at this season and realize something powerful. The breaking was not the end of your story. It was the moment heaven finally got your attention strongly enough to change your direction forever.